Continuing on with our lecture here, so now let's take a look at the cellular structure of our muscles. So now this is the microscopic anatomy of a muscle fiber. So what do we mean by that? So let's first take a look at this one here. We have the cellular components of a muscle fiber. So the sarcolemma, this is the same or equivalent to the plasma membrane of the cell. So remember when we talk about the cell, so if this is the plasma membrane of the cell, right over here, here's the nucleus, right over here, and this would be filled with cytoplasm, right here. And this is the plasma membrane, right here. So that is now the sarcolemma of the muscle cell. So if I draw the muscle cell here, for example, here is the muscle fiber, right over here. So this, right here, this would be the sarcolemma. So the outside part of this muscle here. Sarcoplasm, right? So sarcoplasm, right here, this is now equivalent to cytoplasm. So this is now going to be the inside of the cell right over here. And then of course, now you have the sarcoplasm. This would be the inside of the cell here as well. Sarcoplasmic reticulum, okay? This is the same thing as the endoplasmic reticulum. So remember the endoplasmic reticulum in our cell right there. So endoplasmic reticulum, okay? So you have the smooth ER and the rough ER in the cell. So sarcoplasmic reticulum, this is now going to be equivalent of that in our muscle fiber. So I'm not going to draw it over here anymore. But what I want you to know about is that the function of the sarcoplasmic reticulum is for storage of calcium. Okay, so please don't forget that. So this is where calcium is going to be stored. You have the T tubules here, okay, or known as your transverse tubules. They're going to penetrate the cells, come close to portions of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So we will see this in the next slide in the figure. Sarcolemma right here contains your myofibrils. This is the contractile part of the muscle fibers. Okay? Sarcoplasm also contains glycogen. So glycogen, I want you to know, this is the storage form of glucose, which will provide energy for contraction. Okay? Sarcoplasm includes the red pigment, myoglobin, which is going to bind oxygen. So myoglobin, storage form of oxygen, right there. Okay, so let's take a look at the table over here. So here are the names of what we just mentioned, and here are the functions. So please make sure that you're able to look at them and remember what the names are and what do they actually do. So let's go on to the next slide over here. So the next slide now show us the muscle fiber. So here are the different parts that we just mentioned from the previous slides. So this right over here, this is a single myofibril. So myofibril here. So myofibril here, myofibril right here, okay, right here, and then right here, and of course this one right over here. So your myofibril, okay? So one myofibril. So multiple myofibrils right over here is going to be surrounded by your sarcolemma. So this right over here is your sarcolemma. So this would be the cytoplasm. Sorry, not cytoplasm. This would be the cell membrane right here, right? So this would be the cell membrane. So sarcolemma is the same thing as the cell membrane as we mentioned from the previous one, right? So sarcolemma, plasma membrane or the cell membrane. So that's what is shown right over here. Okay. So what are the other parts that we mentioned from the previous slide over here? So now we also have your T tubules. So this is your T tubules right here. This is the one that basically penetrates all the way through inside, because we need to make sure that these individual myofibril is going to be stimulated, and the only way to do that is for the action potential to travel in here. Okay, so that's what is shown right here. We have a nucleus right here, and then we have another nucleus here, and then we have another nucleus over here. Remember the skeletal muscle, it's multinucleated. So right over here, this is a single cell, muscle cell right here, which has multiple nucleus in them. Okay, what are the other structures that we found here? Your sarcoplasmic reticulum. This is now associated, closely associated with the T tubules right over here. And this sarcoplasmic reticulum, this is where calcium is going to be stored. Okay, and I mentioned already, here is your nucleus right over there. So all these right here, all these components, okay, from here, okay, as it's depicted over here, this is your skeletal muscle cell, or sometimes you're referred to as your skeletal muscle fiber. Okay, so that's what we have here. And looking at this figure here, just to further break it down, this is your skeletal muscle, the whole entire muscle right over here, and now you have each of these individual ones. These are now your fascicles. Remember from the previous slide, right? So bundle of muscle cells, muscle fibers. And this is a single fascicle right over here. And this fascicle right over here is going to be made out of your skeletal muscle cell. Okay? So skeletal muscle cell, and within the skeletal muscle cell, now you have the myofibril, and which is shown right over here. Okay? So that's what we have right there. All right. So the muscle fiber. So looking at our written text right over here. So cylindrical in shape. Okay? So cylindrical in shape. Grouped inside this larger cylinder are smaller cylinders called your myofibrils. So this is grouped within it are known as your myofibrils. So that's what we have right over here. So one myofibril. So you have a cylinder right over here, and then you have another cylinder right over here. This is now your myofibril. So here's your cylinder right over here, and then here's your other cylinder, your myofibril right over here. So grouped inside this larger cylinder are smaller cylinders called your myofibrils. They are going to be made of smaller cylinders still, known as your myofilaments. So inside this, so this would be now your myofilaments. So from here, now you have even smaller ones, known as your myofilaments. So myofilaments is the smallest one, okay, becoming larger. Multiple myofilaments come together to form one myofibril. Okay, multiple myofibril comes together to form your fiber right here, your muscle fiber right over here. Okay, and continue on here, your muscle fiber right over here, multiple of them will come together to form your fascicle right over here. Okay, and then your fascicle come together to form the skeletal muscle. So that's basically the general concept of how we're going to be looking at a muscle. Muscle cell, these are set of small cylinders, your myofilaments. Okay, your myofilaments. Let me erase this real quick. So a muscle cell, set of small cylinders, known as your myofilaments. Myofilaments, right here. So individual, in here. So these are myofilaments, right there. Okay? Assembled into larger cylinders, known as your myofibrils. So now you have your myofibrils, right here. So these myofilaments come together to form your myofibril. Clustered within a largest cylinder, now your muscle fiber, right here. So this is now your muscle fiber. So myofilament, myofibril, and then your muscle fiber. Okay. We have striations that are found here. So this would be the striations that I mentioned previously as well. So as you can see over here, this area is darker compared to this area right over here, right? Or to this area right over here. So this would be the dark, this would be the light, this would be the dark, this would be the light, this would be the dark. You guys get the idea. Okay, so that is your striations right there. Okay, two types of myofilaments. So now looking at the myofilaments specifically, we have two types. You have what is known as your thick myofilaments. These are going to be made out of myosin, and you have thin myofilaments, which are now going to be composed of actin. Okay, myofibrils are further divided into sarcomeres. So this myofibril right over here, okay, one myofibril is now going to be further divided into sarcomeres. So what do we mean by sarcomeres? These are extended between the Z lines. And we will see this, I will emphasize this in a minute here. You have what is called the I band, which is a light colored, made of only thin myofilaments. The A band, overlapping thin and thick myofilaments. So let's take a look at that in our next slide. So here is now our, so this is now the different parts. So looking at our figure here once again, okay? So let's focus on this part, okay? This is a Z line. See the squiggly line right here? And this is another Z line. So this would be a Z line right here, and then another Z line right over here. And we have these structures here. Okay, we have these structures right over here. So from Z line to Z line, this is known as a sarcomere. Oops, this is your one sarcomere. Okay, and within this sarcomere over here, Okay, so let me just redraw one right here. So let's say this is the Z line. So I'm just gonna oversimplify my drawing here. Another Z line right over here. And now we have the actin right here. The actin right here. Okay, so here is the actin. Here's your Z line. And within it, we have the myosin. So this is your myosin right here. This is your myosin. Okay, and of course, there's another extension over here, another extension over here, here, here. You guys get the idea, right? And then once again, you have the myosin here, and the myosin right over here. So what are these different parts? So you have the, once again, two types of myofilaments. So the thick one right here, this is your myosin. Okay, the thin one, so these are your myosins right here. The thin ones, these are your actin. So how can you distinguish between actin and myosin? Which one is thick and which one is thin? So think of it as actin. So there goes your actin right there. Okay, and this one right here, as I mentioned, this is going to be your myosin. All right, so myofibrils, once again, further subdivided. So you have your sarcomere right here. You have the I band, which is the light colored, made of only the thin myofilaments. So this part, from this point on right here up to here, this is known as your I band. Okay, so once again, it's only going to be made out of your thin myofilaments only. The A band right here, overlapping thin and thick myofilaments. So from this point right here up to this point right over here, from here to here, this is now going to be your A band. Okay, all right, so that is our muscle fiber. Continuing on with our next slide over here. Now, the thick filaments specifically is going to be composed of the protein myosin, as we mentioned. Each myosin molecule is shaped like a golf club with a straight portion of the molecule ending in a globular head, for or cross bridge. So here is an example of your myosin. Okay, here is your myosin, so shaped like a golf club. Right, so there goes your myosin right there. Okay, the thin filaments made of two intertwining strands of the protein actin, tropomyosin, and your troponin. So here is now your actin. So this would be the thin filaments, your actin. This would be the circles right here. Okay, and we have the binding site for the myosin head right over here. So these are your actin or G-actin, okay, specifically. And what else do we have here? We also have what is known as your, I'll change color in this one here. So we also have what is called your tropomyosin. So this right over here would be your tropomyosin. Okay, so this is your tropomyosin. It's actually covering the site, the binding site right there. Okay, so tropomyosin. This is going to be in around the actin here. We'll see some figure later on, some nicer figure from our text. So tropomyosin, and attached to the tropomyosin we have what is called our troponin. And again, I will change color this. So this right here, this is now attached to the tropomyosin, is now known as your troponin. So these are your troponin. So these are the three different components of our actin. So when you talk about actin, it has three components. You have the G-actin, tropomyosin, and your troponin. So continuing over here, sliding filament model. The muscle fiber contracts as the sarcomere will now shorten. And we will see how this is in the next slide. So note, when the sarcomere contracts, filaments themselves will remain the same length. Again, I'll emphasize this in a bit. Only the thin filament slides past the thick filament over here. I band therefore will shorten. Z lines move inward. The H band will almost disappear. Again, we'll see this in the next slide. You need ATP for energy in order for a muscle to contract. Myosin filament breaks down the ATP. Remember this right over here? We have the attachment for ATP right here at the myosin head. Okay? And their cross bridges pull the actin filament toward the center of the sarcomere. So what does it all mean? So let's take a look at our next slide over here. This is now our sliding filament model, and I will continue this in our next series of our lecture.